Alright folks, Brian Phillips here. YouTube, we're working on the Phoenix Evolution 2.6 meter in my case. You can make it as a 1.6 meter. And yes, I'm filming the wing that's halfway in the middle of that stack. I debated about whether or not I was going to show you guys this, but it is part of real life for me. Yes, it is. How the heck do I get my wing out from that cluster? I'm going to show you right now. Here's how. You grab the other plane and you get it out of the way. Okay, like this, it comes out. This is all provided that that's down. It happens to be down. Then you pull this out, like so, and you watch out for the hangy dingy light there. Try not to knock anything else down. You lay it on the extra high workstation, and then you take and slip this back up. It actually works quite smooth. This is designed to be out further because the thickness of the fuse narrows down so that there's room to not impact the wing. But while that wing's out, we can put it back all the way. That's why I wanted to show you that, because this thing is huge. It's gigantic, okay? Now, I really wanted to have some decals on here. But I said, guys, why am I going to do decals just to scar this thing up again with some new lines, you know? That's pretty stupid, right? So we're going to do some red and green LEDs here for the nav lights. And then when we're done, we can go ahead and put the decals on. Decals on the top, probably not a big deal. Decals on the bottom would have been. So that's what we're going to do now. Let's confirm. Red goes on this wing, which if I was sitting in the driver's seat of the airplane, the pilot seat, at my left hand would be red. Okay, let's sit in the driver's seat of this plane. Let's verify everything. Holy goodness gracious, the left hand should be red. That's my right hand. This is why I do these things, guys, because I did this while it was upside down hanging in the air. This is wrong, okay? Fuselage would go that way, nose forward, tail back. Nose forward, tail back. That should be green. So, we're going to peel this off right now, and we're going to fix that colossal screw up before that colossal screw up becomes an actual physical screw up later. Okay, we're going to get that correct. We're going to grab the green. Otherwise, all the scale other pilots will think I'm flying backward at them. Okay, cool. Now that we've got that done, we can go ahead and flip the wing upside down. It doesn't matter which color we do first. We got to do both. I've already got these wires picked out from an earlier part of the video series, the LED build series. And so we need to get these wires prepped, and I intend to have you guys watch along with one, but not necessarily both, because these things are going to be identical except just different colors. But this process is good for you guys to go through because everybody inevitably asks me. Not everybody. I would say 10% of my traffic on these LED videos, they say, what kit did you use? I didn't use a kit, guys. I used LEDs that I stripped out of strips. These are white lights. I haven't actually used them much because I've got those other awesome white lights. These ones are red. There's a sticker on there. It's white. It's hard to see though in the video. And then there's a green. Okay? These things work good. I've been very happy with them. Thing I like about them, they don't have that weather resistant coating on there because I intend to take these off the strips anyway. Now sure, you could hook these up to a 3S battery and you'd be able to run them because they're designed to run on like a 12-volt circuit, okay? But I'm not doing it that way. I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to go chop suey. And then I'm going to take out, I don't know, if I can get all three and it works fine, I might use all three, but I'm kind of doubting it. You got to keep in mind, I'm actually running these LEDs on a 5-volt circuit, or whatever voltage comes out of that BEC, or more specifically, whatever voltage comes out of the BEC that's in the Phoenix, which would be 5 volts at 3 amps. I did some research and figured that out, all on my own. You should be proud of me, YouTubers. But I can't close that box, so we'll come back to that. These ones were red, so I'm just going to mark that real quick with a red marker somewhere. Red. Okay? Now I know what it is. These ones are green. You can tell because I put that color on the wire. Okay. Here we got this first cut point. Now the reason I just go to the first cut point, not because I need 3, it's just for the simple fact that I don't want to be wasteful. And you know, if some project comes up where I actually do want to use them in the strips, and I'll go ahead and have them ready to do that then. I sure as heck would never go through the trouble of resoldering these on. That would be insane. See, I can do it. So basically, what we're going to do, the first step that we're going to do on this is, this one's green, so we'll actually go ahead and do a mark on this one as well. These strips have built-in resistors that provide a proper level of resistance on the current limiting resistor for 3 of these that are in parallel or series, depending on which strip you get. I don't actually know for sure. I think these ones are in parallel. But either way, it looks like they're using a 131 ohm resistor. Okay? These ones, the red ones, are using a 331 ohm resistor. And they appear to be in parallel too, but it's kind of hard. No, those ones are in series, it looks like. Yeah, because it goes positive, it goes negative, through to positive, positive over to negative, and then positive over to negative. So these ones are in series. Okay, so they're in series. It doesn't matter for our sake, because what we're going to do is we're going to take this knife and we're going to hold this down. We're going to desolder these sons of guns right now. We're just going to get into this flux and clean the tip. Okay? And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to try to get up under here with our knife. I guess we're doing green first because green's closer to us. So you can get that knife and just kind of work it under the edge. You don't have to go all the way under. Okay? Once you're under a little bit, then you can press this down and twist it. And then once you're twisting, you can apply that heat to the solder. Okay? And that'll desolder it. Right? Once it's desoldered, you can sort of fold these things in half. And that little son of a gun will lift. My autofocus is so horrifically bad on this, I apologize, guys. There's only so many times I can hit the focus button before I just get frustrated. That's tip cleaner as well. It's a different type of tip cleaner. Okay, so we're going to get this second one off. Evidently my camera didn't unpause as expected. I apologize, guys. So we'll get that knife under the edge. A little bit of flux. Try this another direction. I've done this so many different ways, and it's always a pain no matter what I do. So I'd be lying if I said this was easy. It's not. It's a pain in the butt. I shouldn't say it's especially difficult. It's just more... It seems very nonsensical, both to me and to the people watching, I'm sure. Like, why don't you just buy LEDs that... Well, because even if you go and buy SMD surface mount LEDs, they will be, a lot of times they're soldered onto strips anyway. They're not always. Sometimes they're just on adhesive backing in rolls. But usually I get them without losing any on these. You can use a solder wick, and you can usually get those, a solder wick like this, to desolder these with. But it just comes back to whatever method I can do to get it to work. The quickest is what I do. as long as I'm not damaging it. Okay, so we'll just push that down. Okay, so now we can pull that down and away. Once that's pulled down and away, what I did before I thought I had you guys back with me is I held onto it. I'm going to push down and away with a nice clean tip. Okay. The idea is to heat the LED as little as you can and still get the job done. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and pause it, and we'll get the rest of these LEDs off. You don't need to watch it 47 times. Alright folks, we're back. We got the 3 green and the 3 red pulled off. And we're ready to strip these things back. I want to strip approximately the right amount to reach across 3 of those LEDs with some extra. I am going to pull the braid a little bit tighter on each of these. And the reason I'm doing that is because sometimes when you bump a wire that hasn't been braided or pulled, kind of twisted like this, they'll have a tendency to want to kind of go all over the place. And it gets to be a pain in the butt to manage that. So we're just going to get these already done. I did the other half while we were paused. Okay, so clean the tip, mechanically clean it, get your solder ready. Put a little pinch in it so that it'll stand up for you if you want. Lock that solder in. Make sure it's wicking in, you're not just painting it on the surface. Okay, same thing here. And if you have wire that doesn't like taking solder, give it a quick dip into the flux and come back in and solder it now, and it will work, generally speaking. Alright, so now that you've got that done, we came up with a trick on the white set that worked really nice, and we're going to duplicate that this time. So you got a little chunk of green tape just to make it easier for us to remember what we're dealing with. We're going to peel off like, I don't know, maybe 3 inches. Not quite that much even. We can put that out of the way, and we're going to tape this down, okay? And then we're going to do the same thing with the red. Nothing magical or especially good or bad about that tape, just electrical tape. Now, the first thing we're going to do now is we're going to take some mucilage. Here's the part number. If you're so inclined to get this, this is the large tube. I've rolled it up because I had an unfortunate incident where the bottom blew out on me once. This is super exciting. Take yourself a Q-tip if yours is old and dried like mine is. That'll get you started. And what you're going to do is you're going to squeeze out just a little bit, get it started, and then peel out a little bit more. This stuff is kind of like rubber cement. Just do a real small strip of it here. I mean a real small amount. Just long enough for those LEDs to sit there. And then pull the rest up by twisting. And just get that stuck down about where you think you want to put the LEDs. Okay? Need a little bit more on this side, I think. And then go ahead and twist up any excess. Then we can use this to actually pick up the LEDs. Now we need to figure out our polarity, so we'll just set those into the glue anyway. And we'll just make sure that each of them is lined up the same way. Okay? And it's very hard to hold those things by hand. So I'm going to actually just use this each time. And then as you set them down, you can either get a clean Q-tip or you can just use your clean fingertip. Okay? Sometimes you can get these. These ones are a little better than the white ones. So they're quite a bit bigger. Now you'll notice this time I'm leaving a gap. A pretty decent sized gap, in fact, almost a millimeter. And that's so that when we come and install this on the wing, we can wrap the wing. And that way it's wrapped, it'll actually distribute the light top and bottom. Okay, so just using the clean side of my Okay, so we're going to test real quick and see if we can't figure out which side is positive and negative. This is a pretty easy step. Basically take one end of our green, because we'll start with green, that's the green LEDs. And we're going to take the positive side, which is the unmarked, the side without the black strip. We're going to trim these down. These are already tinned, so that's got the black strip, so that'll go up here into one of these. This is called a breadboard if you've never used one before. Then we're going to go to the positive side for this one. Then we're going to put a current limiting resistor across there. Now we've got 3 of these lights in parallel here, so we'll see if we can even get away with this. So we'll probably start with, let's start with 150 ohms. This will probably be a little bit too big, I'm guessing. But too big is alright. If you go too small, you'll burn your resistors. Okay, so there's our 150 ohm 1/8 of a watt resistor between ground and the negative wire. Our wires are not touching, so we're safe to go ahead and energize the circuit. We can tell it's on by these lights coming on. We'll take one side and we'll take the other side. Now we're going to touch both sides of the LED. So I either have not made proper contact or I have the polarity backward. Okay, so that's on. Just verifying on. And on. Okay, so now that we've figured out that the polarity is as such, our negative is on this side and our positive is on this side, we can go ahead and just lay those where they need to be, de-energize the circuit by unplugging the electronic speed control. Now I can just flip each of these, because on this one there's actually there's actually a trace on the bottom rather than being on the sides like the last ones we worked with. So I want to flip these end over end and just making sure we keep them in the same orientation. And there'll be a little bit of residual adhesive on both sides, and that's really not a big problem because believe me, it's going to melt off somewhat anyway. You do not want it on your fingers though, so if you get it on your fingers, either roll it up into a ball or get some kicker and put the kicker on your fingers. But you see, like that, just like when you're a kid playing with rubber cement. Roll up the rubber cement burgers. Now, like a smart feller, we're going to retest, make sure we still have them in the correct orientation before we solder anything. And this is where you see the light flicker and you know you got it. Okay, great. Iron's hot. And put the strippers away while the tip's getting cleaned. We have these on the correct side. Do we have enough length though? I don't know. Maybe we don't. No, it does appear that we do. So this is where you're going to want them to be straight as an arrow. Get the first one done. Second one. And what we're going to do now, once we have that first one, we'll go ahead and clean the tip again. Wipe it off a little bit. Get straight into some solder. I don't like the way that last one's lined, so I'm going to move it a little bit. I think we got them now. Yep, I think we have them now. So now we can just push that back down, and it's hot, but it's not so hot I can't have my finger on it, so it's probably less than 150 degrees. That's a rule of thumb. You guys have never heard it before. If you can hold your hand on it, it's below 150 degrees. If it's above 150 degrees Fahrenheit, then you won't be able to hold your hand on it under most circumstances. It's a rule of thumb. It's not an exact science, guys. Okay, so the first one's soldered. We're going to let that completely cool, and then I'll jump down to this third one. Then we'll let that totally cool, and we're going to get in here really quick and do the middle one so it doesn't desolder the front or the back. Ah, like exactly what happened there. Okay, we're going to pull up a little bit of solder on this one. That worked okay. A little bit here. Now we should be able to quickly heat this. I'm going to get a little flux on here too. Okay, now we're going to let that cool for a minute. Now we'll come back at it with our resistor. Excuse me, with our power. And as you can see, we have 3 lights on. Boom, boom, boom. And look at that, guys. Comes right out of the boogers. Nice green, bright LEDs. Nice. Give it just a real light wiggle. Make sure everything's still intact. And it most certainly is. If you got a little bit heavy on the mucilage, this would be the time when you would go ahead and get in there with some kicker and peel that stuff off. Because you don't want to obstruct the LED lenses. But guys, that went really smooth. So obviously we're going to duplicate that now on the red side, and we'll come right back to you. Alright guys, so I got the red one done. And the green one done. Now it's hard to tell in the video because everything kind of gets saturated in the cell phone camera. But you can see that they're not exactly the same brightness. But we've used 2 10 ohm resistors in series, which gives us 20 ohms of resistance for the 3 red in parallel. While we're only using 1, oh shoot, I don't remember what size that is, but I guess we could measure that now, couldn't we? We're only using the 1/8 of a watt resistor, just to give you an idea of the power handling difference. It's big. But remember how we pulled these off the strips of 3 in series? Okay, so 150 ohm resistor will be enough to suffice between ground and the negative side on the green. Okay, and they're brighter still. So just to give you an idea of how that works, it's got something to do with the wavelengths, the way that the LEDs work. But either way, now that we've got that done and we've tested it, I've been running this for about 5 minutes, and it's not overly, really even hardly warm. So it's possible I could put 1 less in series, but I tried that and it got warm fairly quick, so I think it's going to overdo it. So we can de-energize this. We should be able to tell which one's which. I just need to be mindful that because these are going to need to be in series, I'll need to tie 2 of them together in the middle and then attach to my negative line from the servo, and then of course the negative line on our LED bank. So I'll twist those together now to kind of remind me of that for the moment. And I'll just set that there. Then this one for the green, we'll just set that right there. We can unplug these things. So that's how you do that, guys. And the next step, of course, will be to go ahead and get these mounted physically into the wings. And that's usually actually a fairly easy thing to do. The green will go over here where we've got the green tape, and then the red will go down there. So I'll get these laid out real quick and we'll come right back. Alright, so the first step when I try to lay these things out is I just take note of where the carbon fiber spars are, or any supporting stuff like this. And that gives you an idea of where you could channel if you wanted to, but a lot of times it's easier to just make a new slice. In my case, I'm probably going to make a new slice because I don't want to carry the wire all the way up here just to carry it all the way back. So you see how our LED bank is long. You could put it on the leading edge of the wing, but I don't like to do that on this wing because there's so much more material over here. So I can actually put it right here. And I can wrap it by folding these wires. Now they're tin, so you got to be careful because they will eventually break if you work them back and forth a bunch. So we're going to make this into a horseshoe shape or a U shape. And that's going to allow us to then kind of wrap around the wing surface. Now we don't want to have a big gigantic bump there. So we're going to take our knife, just our regular X-Acto knife. We'll lay this with a forward facing tilt. And I'm just going to come in here just a little bit from the end. And I'm going to slice out about what I think it's going to need to be. Then I'll just slide that out at the end. And I'll do the exact same thing on the face of the top here. And this is where working with foam is actually a huge help, because you can do these things in the wooden models, but it's a whole lot harder, a lot more planning to try to make them look good. Okay, see, now I've kind of pinched it into the foam with the majority pointed outward and downward, meaning I would call it 1 3/4 are pointed down, and then only 1 is pointed up, because we don't typically fly upside down all that too terribly often, especially not in the dark. Now I know there are some people that really just get a kick out of flying upside down. I don't really care. I don't like flying upside down that much. I do it once in a while, mostly to demonstrate that it's possible. So now what I need to do, because it's annoying me, is I'm going to tape these wires down, because they keep popping out and it's driving me crazy. Just kind of pull these tight and just tape them halfway down the wing. Now we're only going to actually reach these wires back to wherever we have our split point, or somewhere in the middle. In our case, I think probably the most intelligent thing to do would be to go ahead and go to where we have our extension cord. The trouble is, that means we have to carry it way over to here. Plus, and if we ever choose to separate this wing, then we have to dink around with that. So I would say on this application, we will go ahead and just peel this tape up, give ourselves a channel to get in, and then we'll go ahead and terminate onto this particular wire. And would you look at that, guys? There's actually a wire right here. I had forgotten about that. Maybe in that case we will carry it. No, I really don't. I mean, if I ever do come up with a way to separate these easily, because it's such a bear cat to store this thing, it's so long. But you have to undo 2 screws, and then you have to undo this, and then you have to slide it out. But you have to do that on both sides. So, and then of course you still have to detach the middle. Although if one had a shorter wing, you could stick this in the car and then you could just carry along the ends. So in this case, I'll probably just go ahead and attach it here. If the servo fails, then the servo fails, and I'll have to redo it, which is unfortunate. But at least in the meantime, I can lift this up and it'll be easy. Okay, so I can unplug this so I've got nice slack to work with. Now, as you know, on the green wire, I need the 1 single resistor, so I won't need quite as much room on the negative side. So just kind of be thinking about these things as you're working through this process. But if you wanted to at this point, you could go ahead and grab your strippers and cut this wire. You need to just make sure you've got this flat and in approximately the right orientation. Okay, so we'll take it to here. We're now committed to that position. We can set this aside for another project. Okay, so at this point, my next step is going to be to, normally I would get this channel cut, so I'll go ahead and get working on that, but I do need to pull this tight and retape it with this piece of masking tape. So the masking tape, I want it to go just around the little tab on the servo, so it's easy to get it into the channel. So I'll push that down very hard. Then I'll just walk this over, and it's going to pull some slack as I go. Make it look as natural as possible. And you can actually just sit there and press. You'll get a nice little detent that will kind of help you to position where your cut's going to go. And you can actually just tape this down too if you prefer. The cut is optional, but I am going to cut it. I'm just following that little mark that's in the foam, and I'm cutting a very shallow cut. Nice and slow here so you don't slice into the actual wires. Now I'm just going to find that slice, and I'm just going to try to work it in there. And if it doesn't go, then I'll go and do another back cut. It doesn't want to go very good, so we'll do a back cut on this one. And this is a very sharp knife blade, so you want to try not to stab yourself. But at the same time, if you have a dull blade, you're going to have a real heck of a time. You'll just almost certainly stab yourself. So I would recommend having a sharper blade and not stabbing yourself. That's a combination effort there. Okay, so now we can take this little sliver out and throw that away. And guys, we're going to run out of memory here pretty soon. So we may come back for one more finish, one more video, or we might just extend this one. I haven't quite decided yet. But one way or another, if it ends abruptly, my apologies. Now I'm just taking a piece of wood, and I'm just opening up the channel just a little bit, which also helps to take out any of the tail that didn't pop out on its own. Now we can drop that down into the channel, just easy peasy. Very simply put. So now is the time that you get out your CA and you start chasing that down. And I usually just use a medium CA. You can also use mucilage if you prefer. I don't for this application. I don't think it works as good. It's a little bit too messy. Okay, so what you're going to want to do is grab your glue and just give it a drip. And then if you can go just beyond it. You see, I did touch that with my fingers, which is always exciting. You don't want to get your fingers glued to it if you can avoid that. But once you get that first little bit glued, it really makes a big difference. It helps a lot. Okay, so now we'll just go a ways up here further. Just get both of those dropped into the channel. And this part always seems like it's going to be easier than it actually is. That's why I've kind of completely gotten away from trying to put holes, channels that are all the way down the middle. It's just darn near impossible to do that right. Okay, and just a little bit of kicker there does wonders. And remember, you don't have to glue the entire thing down. You certainly can. But if you choose not to, and you're satisfied not having any more, then that's probably the way to go. Because less is more on these planes. You know, you'll carry around less weight. In my experience, I've generally gone pretty much the whole length. This is kind of a long one, so grab a Q-tip here. I'm just going to work that excess. Now this step here, sometimes I'll actually start with the step of gluing down the LEDs themselves, but it's just so easy to hold it into this one. It's just kind of biting onto the wing perfectly, so I don't mind doing that later. I just don't want to forget to do it. Okay, so now we'll come back up here. I just put these wires back in. You can see what happens when you try not to glue it. It just kind of wants to come back out no matter what you say or do. Okay, so we'll grab these two wires here and we'll just tug on those. Okay, so now this is the spot where you're going to need to get the knife back out before you have it glued all the way up in here. We're going to want to open up that channel if we haven't already to transition from where we stopped cutting into the actual factory's channel. Just going to do that channel there, and I'll do my other cut. So 2 quick cuts. Sometimes you can get lucky and just do the one cut. Always try that first if you can, because if you can do it with one cut, that's always the preferred method. Well, that's interesting. Out came my control horn. Hope the other one's not like that. Better to find out now than when you're flying, right? Now if you find yourself getting glue all over your fingers here, you won't be alone when you're doing this project. So when you're done, you can just use some nail polish remover, acetone, and wipe off your fingertips and you'll be good as new. Alright, so this time with a negative wire, I'm going to go ahead and just get a little bit of a channel of CA as we approach our exit point, because I really want this to be sturdy here. And I'm going to drop that down in there. Just like that. I take my positive lead just the way they happen to be sitting in the channel. There's no other rationale for that. I'm going to make sure that gets plopped down in there real nice. Funny thing is, you would think if you get kicker on your fingers that everything would stick right away. Well, that's actually the opposite. It seems to not stick because it cures before it can stick you to it. Okay, so we have a negative wire and a positive wire. Looks like this is the negative wire. Doesn't matter which one we hook up first, we got to hook them both up. So that's going to be our next step. But while we finish these steps, I don't want to leave this glue uncapped. So we'll do this. So we need our strippers, which we have here. Then we have our knife. And first things first, we'll separate the 3 wires. 1 separation. 2 separations. Now we're going to exacerbate the separation. We're going for red is going to be our positive wire. We'll just pull the sheath back in an attempt to expose the copper without breaking the wire. And we'll take the X-Acto knife blade, stick it into the bundle of wire, and open it up. Soldering iron's getting hot. Get that cleaned off quick, because we'll need that clean in a minute. First clean, we got to get quite a bit on there, so. Then we're going to come back with the strippers. We're going to grab our positive one, the one without a black wire. We're going to make sure we have a little teeny bit of slack. We're going to trim it. Let that out of the way. Then we're going to take and strip back the end. Ooh. Pulled that right out of the CA, dang it. That usually doesn't come out quite that easy, but it's fine. This tells me I need a little bit more on there. Now we'll feed this through. Gotta pull those wires apart from one another. And we'll wrap it around like this. And I'm going to go ahead and use up this whole chunk of wire that I stripped back. Normally I would trim it, but in this case these are both pretty small wires, and I want to strengthen this joint as much as I can. Okay, so we're going to be pretty sturdy there now. And we'll have to just take our slack and stick it back there when we're all done. But for the moment, we'll go ahead and get that soldered right now. Unplug it from the wall. Clean the tip. Come over here. And really get that stuff heated up. Then the next step is going to be for us to, this is the green, so we're going to put this resistor in here on the negative side. The red ones are the ones that needed the bigger resistors. Okay, that's cooled down, so we can actually tape that real quick. We have this red tape that we used just a minute ago for holding the LEDs in place. So this is a pretty good way to use that up. Kind of a lot of tape there, but we may open up that pocket a little bit too, just depending on how big everything turns out. Okay, so we got our negative wire here. We only have this one little resistor to use, so I'll go ahead and come out toward the front of the separation in the wires. I'm going with the same cut point, which is the second size on these strippers. Pulling it back toward the servo. Just let go. And I can come in here and I think I'm going to strip this back about here. Now there will be a little bit of excess on both of these. That's fine with me. So now this, we need to get soldered to that. I'm actually going to cut the tail now. Like I've said before, I like those tails, so I keep them. Need something with a real fine tip for this step. Just basically going to make a little loop. Alright, so we have our little loop there. So now at this point, we can go ahead and solder that as well. Okay, so now we'll come back, plug this thing back in, keep it hot, ready to go. Then we're going to feed the other end in through here, but we'll put a little bit of heat shrink over this first. Doesn't need to be enough to cover both sides. It just needs to be enough to cover our resistor. We didn't use very much on this, so just make sure that's long enough. Oh yeah, that'll be enough. We'll cover something like that. Now we never used the knife to actually open this up yet. So just kind of slide that in there. Not trying to cut it, we're just trying to open it up like that. Take this resistor, slip it in. Double it back. Gonna hold on to that, just pull tight. Now I need some side cutters. These side cutters are gonna give us something sharp. We can pull this black wire to collapse that section of wire. I'm trying to cut it square. Hopefully that'll avoid having a nasty sharp point. Okay, so now let's get that soldered. Clean the tip, a little bit more flux. There you have it. We'll leave that unplugged for now. So now at this point, we would be heating this heat shrink up to collapse that down. and then we'll tape the little exposed portion. You could also pull these wires out and then put heat shrink over that way as well, since we're so close to the end. I don't know if I'm going to do that because I don't think I care that much about it. It's going to get covered up anyway. It'll be a fairly safe place. Even if we have a failure of this heat shrink, we have to also have a failure of tape on the other side, and we have to shift them into contact with one another, which is pretty improbable. So we'll just take a little bit of black tape. Only need enough to go around a couple of times. We'll tape over this little section. That'll help to afford us a little bit of mechanical strength on this electrical joint, as well as isolation from the positive in the event of a failure. So now we can take and verify our color code, which is going to go back in here, the plug, and we'll just slide that in, and everything seems to be okay there now. So now we have to respect our space here. We may have to do, I'm just holding my hand underneath the wing here so I can press really hard and push that resistor into the foam there. And then this little bit of excess, we're going to manage that real quick. Yeah, that's annoying when you get that little teeny bit of excess, because really it's like one loop worth. It's not even enough to think about, you know. Alright, so we can bring this stuff out, reglue the channel where it had been resting before I screwed that up by yanking it out, clean the tip off, move these two resistors. Now there's no fear of confusing them. Grab this, have it ready. We're going to drop this thing in to the new puddle of CA that we've created here. And that CA is going to hold that just fine now. Okay, perfect. Our next step, of course, is to cover this back up, but there is one consideration, that is you want to wipe down with alcohol this whole spot. This is a critical step because you've got kicker that you've been using, and that kicker will stop the tape that you're using from continuing to stick down to one degree or another. Not completely, not immediately necessarily, but sometimes both. And so you'll just work this stuff back into the groove. And if you have a real heck of a time, you may have to increase the size of the groove a little bit. I've only had to do that a couple of times, luckily, but maybe you won't be so lucky on yours. And we can just hopefully put this tape right back down. And just kind of cover up that wire. And then this last little bit will be covered by just run-of-the-mill white electrical tape. Now you notice that you could probably get away with less, but on a project like this, I actually am going to use a little bit more than's needed. So it doesn't hurt my feelings to waste a little bit on this, because that extra thickness will give a little extra strength to the wing too. Now if you have a wing that's got a high propensity to flexing and you want to eliminate that, you can use this stuff here, which is basically like 3M duct tape. It's colored, it's white. Stuff works good for this type of application. And absent decals, that would be one of my go-to choices if I want it to be white. Okay, so we've got that pressed down, and that will obstruct our cable. Okay, and that'll also help to keep this side down since it was delaminated that once. Now we need to finish gluing the other side of the wing. Yes, you can see I laid a pillow on top of the middle of the wing. And that's just there to help keep it weighted down so I don't accidentally knock it off. So we'll flip this the other way, and we can take a look at the top. Now at this point I'm going to press into the wing the LED on top. We haven't given any attention yet to it. We'll just do a little bit of glue between, a little bit of glue on top and around. But since it's such a steep slope, I'm going to put a little bit of kicker to get it going right now before I even continue. And we'll just go around like this. Being mindful to keep it from running. It always likes to run on these weird surfaces like this. Okay, so now one thing too is you want to be sparing on how much of that kicker you end up using, for the simple fact that we've got this tape right here. And that tape will have a tendency of wanting to let that stuff wick under it. So the less you can get away with and still have a good job is what you want to use. And that means you may actually want to use a spray bottle, which sounds a little bit counterintuitive. But you can get a little bit less on each of the surfaces. And then when you're done, you just wipe it off with alcohol. Okay, so now normally you'd want to do a little bit of texture on this as well, but I've got a little bit of building up to do on this surface. And just the lightest of pressure I can give the spray bottle there. Okay, so now I'm going to flip the wing back upside down again. One real quick tip. You'll see I put these little plastic things on here. They keep the screws from falling out. I did that right after I glued the tail with hot glue. And I honestly forgot to film it because it was such a simple thing. I was like, I'm just going to do this real quick. Okay, now if that drips, I'm not going to be so mad about it because, to be honest with you, that drip will go down right in front of and between those two LEDs where there's a gap in LEDs. Which I can tolerate that point having a drip, because drips will help to distribute the light. So of course that's what we're after, is to diffuse the light now. or one of the aspects of what we're after. So here I'm just trying to make it a little bit bigger in general. Okay, so now we'll let that set for a second, and we'll go ahead and power this up. Now, this is really awkward to do because the nature of the wing and everything. So there's a couple of different routes you could go to do that. One route is actually to use another electronic speed control, such as this one, to walk over, and you can test it that way. And that actually does work pretty good, but you have to build on a female end usually. Well, it depends on how this is configured. I forget how this is. Yeah, so you'd have to have a female to female adapter. Or you can take this off. And honestly, I'm not 100% sure. Oh, it's the yellow one. Okay. So black is the top and red is the middle. Black is the top, red is the middle. Okay. So we got that plugged in now. So we should be able to energize this one spot with our temporary setup. Except I evidently don't have this right yet. So I'm wondering if I've got the wrong pins. Nope. I don't think I have the wrong pins. I just don't know that I had it all the way in. There we go, guys. And so we have a green set of lights. And it's quite intense. So that's great. So there you have it, guys. So we'll come back and give you a final look at it when we're done with the red. Alright guys, so we got both sides done now. YouTube, we're back again. We've got the green lights running. Notice how it's wrapped underneath the wing. We got the tail light under there that's running. We've also got the red light that's running now. It's also wrapped underneath the wing. And then of course the ailerons work. Elevator works. Flaps. Extreme crow. Okay, so everything is working as expected. And now I'll give you guys a quick shot without power, so you can see what these things look like. They're pretty ugly, but that's the way they have to look to diffuse the light properly. You guys have already gotten a pretty good shot at the tail. So let's show you what it looks like in the dark. Okay, we'll go ahead and actually put the cover on. Okay, we got the receiver, or transmitter rather. Okay, light's going off now. You can definitely see really good in person. This is really good for orientation. And you guys can see how bright that white light is. It's like crazy bright. It's good. It's impressive. I think it's going to work well. I think it's going to work really well. And one of my favorite things about this is that red light, you can still see the red light, And it's just so dang hard to film this inside of the building because it's so huge, which is part of the reason why it's so cool. I'm going to try to flip this upside down. Okay, so we got it upside down. I'm going to run the flaps in the extreme setting. See how bright that is, guys? That's just awesome. Alright, guys. You've seen all there is to see right now. Come back for more. We're going to remain this as soon as the weather cooperates. But this Phoenix 1.6, 2.6. Check the description below. Got a list of the entire build series, including this series where we're doing the LEDs. And don't forget we did this awesome little hinge thing, which worked out really good. Still totally removable. We got 3 screws there, 3 little screws that we can easily take out. Takes all that play out of the rudder, which would definitely have not allowed you to move the whole thing like I just did there. Thanks for watching, guys. I really appreciate you being a part of this experience. Come back for more action. Check down below in the description. Buy yourself one of these. Help support the people that sent this to me for a review. Then a little bit further down you can find the Lemon RX receivers and some different stuff that I've worked on in the past. So appreciate you coming back. One last quick look before we shut it off.